Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, went on a Twitter tirade, I would call it, last night, a 20-tweet thread discussing about their new product about lending. So we have the thread here that we're going to pull up, and we'll just read through most of it and try to give you guys the details. So Coinbase, the most simple way to put it is they're adding a lending product where you can use your securities and take out funds against them. Other crypto brokerages have this product. Brian Armstrong is trying to implement it for Coinbase. So Brian Armstrong reads, some really sketchy behavior coming out of the SEC recently. Story time. Love that he started it with story time. Then he says, millions of crypto holders have been earning yield on their assets over the last few years. It makes sense. If you want to lend out your funds, you can earn a return. Everyone seems happy. A bunch of great companies in crypto have been offering versions of this for years. Coinbase came out recently and said we would be launching our own version. Then he proceeded to say, they responded by telling us this lend feature is a security. Okay, that seems strange. How can lending be a security? So we asked the SEC to help us understand and share their view. We always make an effort to work proactively with regulators and keep an open mind. They refused to tell us why they think it's a security. And instead, they subpoenaed us with a bunch of records from us. We complied, demand testimony from our employees, we comply, and then they tell us they will be suing us if we proceed to launch, with zero explanation as to why. Look, we're committed to following the law. Sometimes the law is unclear, so if the SEC wants to publish guidance, we're also happy to follow that. It's nice if you actually enforce it evenly across the industry. A little chirp there from Brian. But in this case, they're refusing to offer any opinion in writing to the industry on what should be allowed and why, and instead are engaging in intimidation tactics behind closed doors. Whatever their theory is, it feels like a reach, land grab versus other regulators. Meanwhile, plenty of other crypto companies continue to offer a lend feature, but Coinbase is somehow not allowed. So Brian continues and he goes on a bunch of, he adds another 10 tweets or so. But the gist of it is he's confused as to why the SEC is now regulating against Coinbase that they cannot do this. Other companies, right? I think one thing to make important is clear, and like I think John and Paulina feel the same way. We don't know all the details, right? So we don't want to get in the nuance of why this is or is not allowed, what the SEC's viewpoint on this is. But the facts are the facts, and they're trying to launch this feature. Other companies have this feature live currently, and the SEC is saying no. So, John, let's start with you. What do you think about this? Is Brian's approach the right way to go through Twitter and the traditional versus the traditional PR method?
It seems almost, and I don't want to say his word, but it seems almost like a desperate approach. Like he's tried every other avenue. He doesn't know kind of what else to do. He's basically saying, hey, look, these rules should be industry agnostic. Like if you're going to have a rule, have it for the entire industry, which I understand. You don't want to be egregious with those rules. But look, he's taken to Twitter, and we see this more and more people using their audiences to kind of make a difference in what's happening in their business, their company, their lives pretty much. So it's interesting to see his approach. I don't think the SEC is going to be on Twitter and respond to him that way. But we'll see. I mean, I think we're gonna get an answer from the SEC pretty shortly if people start kind of rioting almost.
Yeah. Pauline, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think as a CEO of this company, this is the right approach. I like that he said, look, we're committed to following the law. Sometimes the law is unclear. So if the SEC wants to publish guidance, we're also happy to follow that. It's nice if you actually enforce it evenly across the industry, by the way, which is a little bit of a dig. But I think it's smart because it's like, he's openly saying, like, as the CEO of this massive company, we want to follow the rules. Just tell us what the rules are. It just reminds me of like when, you go to pay your taxes and you're like trying to guess, and you're like, just tell me what to pay and I'll pay you. Why do I have to guess? It's the same thing.
Yeah, so I think about this in two ways. I think that it's probably a little bit worse than they made it seem because they're allowing him to go out on Twitter, right? And they're releasing this stuff. So he's playing it off as in like, they got a subpoena now and it's been going on for a little bit. But it almost makes it seem like it's much worse than they let on to believe because he's like, I feel like if you're a PR person, like letting your CEO tweet out to the public about kind of your fight with the SEC is the last case scenario. So that's what they did. They want to be open. That's awesome. I'm a fan of that. Then secondly, from the SEC perspective, Mark Cuban had a good comment underneath, and he essentially said like, Brian, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to regulate this. Other companies are doing it. They don't want to be put into a position where they make the wrong decision. So what they're going to do is they're going to do this through litigation. They're going to allow the lawyers to get involved, and they're going to let them make the decision. And Cuban obviously admitted that that is probably the worst thing you want to happen. But I thought it was interesting that that's what it seems, right? Like it seems like the SEC doesn't want to be put in the position to have to say yes or no on this arrangement. They've obviously let other companies do it that haven't come to them and say that we're doing it. But at the end of the day, you have to establish framework that is equal across the industry. You can't allow one player to capitalize on something that the other person isn't. So kudos to Coinbase if they actually did go ahead and go to, there's Mark Cuban's comment right there. He said, Brian, this is regulation versus litigation. They aren't capable of working through this themselves and are afraid of making mistakes in doing so. That they leave it to the lawyers. Just the people you don't want impacting new technologies. You have to go on the offensive. And I think he's absolutely right. Mark gets some crap in the crypto community sometimes for some of the things he's said in the past and vice versa. But in this case, I think he's right in the aspect of like, you have to establish regulations that are even across competitors with the industry. And you can't allow one competitor to do something that the other is not allowed to, especially in a product like lending on securities that is profitable for these companies.
The problem is fighting the SEC is tough. He says go on the offensive. Like, what is Brian Armstrong supposed to do in that situation?
Well, I think he's saying argue with him, right? Tell him why that you should be able to do this and force your way into doing it. And to be determined if that's the right solution. But I think it's interesting that Coinbase is essentially being punished for going to the SEC and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. Because from what I can tell, other companies that have implemented this policy and these guidelines and these products, the lending products, have just done it on their own and say, we're launching these products, we're doing these things. And some companies have gotten in trouble for them and some have kind of gone freely with them. So I think it's interesting that the SEC is taking an approach of saying, hey, you came to us first. We don't really know what to do with this. So we're going to involve lawyers and we're going to subpoena you and we're going to do all these things. But we're also going to let the same players that didn't come to us and didn't tell us beforehand, we're going to allow them to kind of continue doing business as they are currently.
He said he hit up the SEC and said, hey, look, we just gave you a heads up we're launching it. We didn't have to.
Yeah.
So do you think that he went with this like approach publicly on Twitter to tell his customers, or do you think he did it to put pressure on the SEC to give out guidance?
Yeah, I think it's almost the latter. And I'm assuming that's what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I agree that he wanted to be proactive, but if he wanted to just push it through, he would have done it like every other company has done. Coinbase is one of the largest players in the entire space. They're a public company, so they follow kind of different regulatory rules and they have different options available in their toolkit. But I think at the end of the day, what he wants framework established across the entire industry, right? And he wants everyone to play by the same rules. He understands that they're a massive company. They have a huge first mover advantage within the crypto brokerage industry, and he wants them all to follow the same guidelines. And by doing this, you almost force the SEC's hand of saying, hey, look, this is the guidelines we're going to follow. If he has to be the guinea pig in that situation, I'm sure he doesn't love that. But at the end of the day, that might get rules across. I'm curious what your guys' approach is on doing it as through Twitter versus traditional PR methods. Do you like that he's open and he's doing threads?
As a former reporter, I think it makes much more sense for him to do it over Twitter. There's a lot of crypto people on Twitter paying attention. I don't think it would have necessarily maybe gotten the same kind of attention if it was done through PR and traditional press. But obviously now I am sure that media companies are going to pick up his thread and turn it into an article.
It also makes it kind of like journalism is very like one-sided, right? Like, as I'm sure you probably know a little bit, is you can do, but you write an article, right? And it's very hard for people to kind of debate on the article. It's not really like a forum necessarily. And social media creates that aspect for people to be able to have the conversation with it. He's got Mark Cuban responding to his tweet. Like it's very difficult to have that kind of level of transparency between two people on a traditional legacy platform.
Yeah, I think social media, like this is the thing we always talk about, has changed industries in a variety of ways, right? So with athletes, they have the ability to talk to fans directly. The media doesn't play as much of a role. CEOs have that same ability when it comes to regulations and rules and things that are happening within their company. It's a public company, right? There's tons of retail shareholders that own Coinbase and vice versa, people that use the platform and so on. So I think it's cool that Brian's able to do this and he's able to go put out his opinion and he stayed pretty fair, right? He didn't say anything that was ridiculous. He didn't go out of line, and he was pretty open and honest with their approach to everything. So I think this now throws the ball back in the SEC's court, and it's like, hey, how are you going to respond to this, right? And if they do the same approach of legal and litigation and all these things that people are commenting on, I think it's going to be a losing approach in the end, because at the end of the day, like their jobs are to set these rules and regulations. And just because crypto is a new industry that people aren't familiar with, you still have to take it just like anything else, right? You have to be able to understand it. You have to look at the technology, and you have to go out and make rules and regulations regulations against it. So I think Brian is rightfully probably a little upset. He's trying to move forward and continue to build his business and provide services and ultimately please shareholders, right? And say, look, we're offering these new products, we're increasing our revenue, we're pleasing customers, we're doing all these things. So he's probably a little frustrated that the SEC is taking this much of a step back approach.
What's up, guys? Bang, bang. Thanks so much for watching the Best Business Show today. If we're going to be the best business show, we obviously need the best partner. That's why the exclusive sponsor of the Best Business Show is SoFi. They're an all-in-one platform that allows you to invest in all kinds of different assets, including stocks, ETFs, crypto, IPOs, and they even have an automated investing function, if that's your thing. So before we start getting after it again, make sure that you go download SoFi, you get an invest account, and when you make your first crypto trade, regardless of what you buy, they'll give you $10 in Bitcoin for free. It's that simple. Head on over to SoFi.com/pomp to get started today. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope that you come back and watch more of the Best Business Show tomorrow.